Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I'd like to dedicate the first minute of this podcast to Mrs. Keys, my third grade
Oh,
teacher. Thinking of her smiling face will keep me going for a little while longer here. And
that's so very sweet.
that's all I can remember about her is her smiling face. It was,
Hmm.
but joining me, of course, is my co-host Jessica Lewis.
Well, hello, everyone. And perhaps I should consider who I would like to dedicate this time to. Maybe I'll go back to my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Keefe, which sounds eerily like the
Mm,
same name you had for your teacher. She was an incredibly scary woman, but
ah,
also someone who reminded us what we needed to do when we were in kindergarten. And she suffered a lot with those kindergartners. So I really would like to dedicate this time to her as well.
okay, all right.
Hmm.
Um, Well, yes, the alligabler was dedicated to dedicating his dedications during that challenge. But here we are dedicated to following a path each week where we will compare Dwight's game to the rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season one, have been updating ever since. We
Yes.
will look at all the non-spoiler information available to us, including interviews, social media, secret scenes, whatever we can dig up.
Yes, and listen, Gabler, I got to give you props for the dedications because truly it was incredible to hear about the veterans and the respect that you have for them, and obviously we all respect them as well. But I do think that Survivor had a little bit of fun with the manner in which it edited the dedications.
You mean his dedication to Alaska?
He dedicated things
And
to everyone.
Idaho. And yes.
There was a lot of dedications. Maybe I should dedicate the rest of my time to my dog Echo, who's probably upstairs trying to eat her way through the door because I'm not with her. But it was very reminiscent of another challenge that we saw that went on for about 6 hours that there was a lot of talking going on.
Yes. I made a comment about Gabler hubickying Cody. And a lot of people had similar thoughts.
Yes. Yeah, it was
you know,
very interesting. It was very interesting to take it
yes.
all in. and
Cody's
to
just like,
watch.
oh my God, just let me hold on to this. Wait,
I
maybe I
know.
just better stop it before he starts talking about Reuben sandwiches. That's what he should have done. I dedicate this next minute to the Reuben sandwich.
Well, and I listen again. I'm not trying to speak ill of anyone, but Cody and the wrestling match, it took
Yeah.
me. It took it like I was a little like, wait, what did he really just say? A
Yes.
wrestling match that he lost when he was in high school? I don't know if that's real. If it is, and he's still hanging on to that, it must have been a very traumatic experience. But it was a fascinating domino where it was heart surgery, my childhood dream, and a wrestling match.
Wrestling match when I was in high school. Yes. Well, I was going to say before we get to the rules, we always have a lot of things to talk about, but well, we already started.
Yes, we did.
And now my intent was not necessarily to, well, I guess I did start with the dedication. So, but to start this section with your favorite topic, a rock draw.
Oh God, here we go.
Except in this case, nobody was getting their torch snuffed because
No.
they just all decided that was the best way to avoid dealing with the sticky issue of who should pair up with whom.
I mean, I will say, good idea because
Yeah.
it's got to be awkward to feel like that schoolyard pick
Mhm.
moment and know, am I going to get picked or not get picked? And you really kind of then see the divisions. So probably a smart idea to do it the way they did.
Yeah. I'm sure production was sad because they did it so they would get drama, but the players were like, nope.
Well, because don't you see, there's so much love that's happening out there, even though they're all fighting for $1 million. There's love. There's so much love.
There's so much love. Yes. And that was another topic I wanted to bring up because, when he was talking at the end of the first part of the never ending challenge, he told people to help Noel and Janine. And then after they did, he talked about how great it was that they helped.
What were they going to do? Just be like, no?
Yeah.
Let him flounder and stay there?
Figure it out. And then he just went on and said that even in a game, you still have the capacity and the empathy. And okay, yeah, that's true. But there's that whole pretend to be nice issue.
Right.
And nobody is going to want to vote for a complete a-hole to win. Sometimes it happens, but it's just not a good idea, wrestle hands, to turn yourself into one. I mean, so yes, they're nice in that situation at that moment when they have literally nothing to lose. But
Yeah.
the same isn't going to be true when it comes to scheming and voting and everything else that goes on in the game.
Yeah, because I guarantee you, if it was in the middle of the challenge and they were all competing with each other and somebody got stuck, the likelihood of anyone stopping to then help the person during a
No, I mean,
challenge.
we saw it. Nobody else stopped.
Right.
Nobody
I mean, if
stopped and
they're
said, let's
working
go back and
together,
help
it's
her.
one thing.
Yeah.
But if they're working against each other because it's a competition, they're not going to help. But are they just, the challenge is done at that point? So what are they? They're just going to like let these two people like be tied
Right.
up in the rope in the mud and just be like, let's keep going. That's not going to happen. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah. And, I do think this leads to the next point that I wanted to bring up about Noel, because I think they're starting to worry about her through the lens of what we saw there. Everybody being so nice to her, everybody being like, oh, she inspires me.
Mm.
And all of that's true. I mean, Gabler even gave her one of his dedications. Um,
There were so many to give.
yeah, but nobody else got one that we saw. And,
Right.
I think they're starting to look at her and be like, we can't let her anywhere near the finals.
Right.
And I have a hypothesis. I think when we saw Jesse ask Carla, they were talking about Noel, and Jesse said, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Mm-hmm.
It was put into a collage of clips that made it sound like they were talking about her trying to control the game.
Mm.
I don't think that's what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was like, did you see what I saw at the challenge with everybody like being in love with Noel?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one reason that her name came up as well.
Well, and I just want to say this too about Noel. She is a badass, and we talked about this at the beginning when we were going through the tribes when we were learning about them. And she was an incredible athlete before she had her accident and lost her leg. She's an incredible athlete after she lost her leg and now has a prosthetic. And she's probably a better athlete than a majority of people that have come on to Survivor.
Yeah.
And so to me, watching her, she's an inspiration just because she's a badass, regardless of what physical condition she's in, because she's great at any point in her life, right? And so I almost feel like it's doing her a disservice for Survivor to seem to be emphasizing that necessarily more than they should, because she's just incredible despite what she's been through. And I'm not trying to downplay what she went through. That's an incredible trauma, and she was able to come back from it and continue to be that incredible inspirational person she was. And so they should have been afraid of Noel from the beginning. And we talked about that she was probably going to get into the challenges and kill it. And that's what she's been doing. So let her kill it, and let her be awesome. And don't try to take anything away from her because there's this other part of Noel that, when she had to take her leg off while she was in the ropes. Well, okay, yeah, and she did that because she was working her way through it, and she was getting through the challenge. So I just feel like something might be taken away from just her as the incredible person that she is and the ability for her to like get through these things. So I don't know. I just feel like it's a strange mix to be watching at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's more like a double inspiration, and so, but whatever. I mean, it's just the way, just the way it's coming across as the way the other players are looking at her and saying, holy cow, we cannot let her get to the end.
Well, that's what I mean. She's
And
incredible. Like,
right,
yeah,
and
and
on
that's
different
yeah,
levels. And
yes.
I mean, we'll see as time goes by, but I do think that was one thing that I think, again, this is solely my hypothesis. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is something that Jesse and Carla were speaking about.
And that would make sense. I mean, because it certainly fits into what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is one of those things where, yeah, Noel is a force and you better watch out for her.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, moving to a different topic, which I know you will like, we need to applaud James as he essentially spoke for us in telling Jeff at Tribal Council that you can't just rely on advantages.
That went on forever.
It did, but hey, it was a good point. You need to work with the group of people you trust to gain knowledge about what's going on. Oh, wait, you mean you need to play Survivor?
Yeah.
Maybe Jeff should listen to that.
Yeah, no, I do think, but I also feel like the way that James was talking about the advantages, it was almost like, everyone just relax. I might have an advantage, but it's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. It's not all about that. Don't look at me. Let's look at something else. I almost feel like that's why he talked as long as he did about advantages. It just seemed to go on a little bit longer than necessary.
Not longer than a dedication or a challenge. It was a long challenge. Yeah.
But it was the challenge went on forever.
Yes.
But I will say thank you, no puzzle.
And I will say that's terrible, no puzzle. You
Why
need to have a puzzle in there.
Well, you don't need to have a puzzle in every single challenge. Maybe he can dedicate each piece to the next puzzle to somebody.
That's right. As I'm putting this piece in, I will dedicate it to.
Oh my gosh. Terrible. Just terrible.
All right. Well, one more thing I wanted to mention is that Janine is on Twitter, but she isn't very active. But after this episode, she had a+ winning tweet of the night when she said, "Watching my number one go home, and Dwight too."
With her idol in his pocket.
That was the number one.
I know. Gosh. I feel so awful. It like to go through everything they went through to try to switch it up. Now, I was thinking about this too, because the whole idea was we want to throw James off. We don't want James to know where the advantages, idols, whatever might be. Not knowing that you've got Sammy running around telling everybody what's happening.
And
I mean, Sammy is just, and Jesse, they're just spilling the tea, telling everybody everything about who's moving things where. And I know that they don't necessarily know this, but I feel like it might have been fun for Janine to have gotten her idol back without anyone else knowing, right? Like, everyone thinks that I gave it to Dwight. And then she goes back to Dwight and says, "Dwight, don't say anything, give it back to me, because now if anyone has been told that you have it, they won't know that I took it back. And then if they ask you, right?"
Yeah, I mean, this we'll get into, I think, once we get into the rules, but they were just so confident that
they were really confident, but I feel like now that this has happened, I'm sorry, but like now that this has happened, I feel like people are going to be less inclined to want to play this let's hide the idol. Maybe they'll learn, just don't tell anybody that they have one.
Yeah, don't tell literally everybody.
Right. Because now it's like put on blast that if you do this and it backfires and you've handed your idol off to someone and that person gets voted out, there goes your idol. But if nobody knows you have it, then there's no knowledge is power capabilities, right?
Right.
Stop talking to everyone about everything. I mean, gosh, James ran around and told everybody he had the knowledge of power. Now, granted,
Yes.
he found it in front of 3 other people in the well, couldn't really hide it. But then he was like sharing with everybody. Like, yeah, I got this thing.
Yeah. And then
Anyway.
the producers like, no, we are going to keep this in the game. You can keep voting people out who have it, but we are going to keep putting it back.
Yeah.
Producers, get a clue. We don't want it. The players don't want it. Get rid of it.
They put it in the water barrel, so they would definitely find it.
Yes. So
it reminded me of the time I found a gecko in the water well when we were out there.
Yeah. Do you think the producers put that in it? Maybe it was a secret advantage gecko.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe
so
you had
disgusting.
to cut it open and see.
Oh, Lord. No, not okay. Not okay. Mm-mm.
Or maybe it was an advertisement for Geico.
It could have been. There was a lot of them out there. It could have been a lot of advertisements.
Yeah, it could have been an in-game advertisement for Geico.
They should definitely sign up with Geico.
Was it speaking with a British accent?
Incredible. All right, I'm sorry. We're getting off on a tangent here.
A slight one, yes. Do you have anything else you want to discuss before we move on to the rules?
I feel like there's not that much that we can discuss just because we've brought up all the main points, but it was such a strange episode. Yes, it was an incredibly strange episode that I think left us all kind of scratching our heads a little bit just because there was so much focus on the challenge and not enough focus on the deliciousness that happened after the challenge. Like, to me, that's where the time should have been spent because clearly this was a thought out vote in a different type of way. It wasn't like the votes that we've been seeing thus far. And so I feel like they left us kind of hanging a little bit. I don't like that.
Well, they're just trying to ensure job security for us.
Apparently.
People are like, wait, why did Dwight lose? Oh, there'll be a podcast on that in a couple days. Okay.
Right. So we'll be able to figure it out for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
we just have the weight of the world on our shoulders.
That's it. That's all.
Keep holding it up.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, before we see how Dwight did, we need to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version in poster form. Go to robhasawebsite.com/YXLostFeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, and order. And then our shipping department will rush it to you.
That's right.
In addition to the poster, we have other ways to have the rules with you at all times. There is the poster t-shirt. There is the checklist t-shirt. There is the checklist mug. There is the checklist sweatshirt. And there is also the poster sweatshirt and everything. I heard, although we were not able to be at the Washington, D.C. live event, I did hear there were Why Blank Lost shirts up in the crowd. So
love that. Very good. Thank you, everyone.
For us.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And the Why Blank Lost checklist, I was thinking about this. It's front and back. People don't know that.
Yes. That's, I mean, if a little inside secret here, at the end of each season, when we do Why Blank 1, I wear my t-shirt backwards. It's not the most comfortable to wear a t-shirt backwards,
but you are that dedicated to the cause
for you. That's
right.
Do it for the listeners. Well, the viewers. Listeners can't see it. Viewers can.
Right.
So yeah. But yes, you can also hear. It's a lot easier to see. Look, Why Blank Lost. Why Blank Lost. Why Blank Lost. There we go. All right. This has gone on long enough.
I know we need to get into this because people are curious. Why the hell did Dwight go home?
Well, Dwight seemed to have gotten himself into a pretty secure position. He wasn't really standing out. He didn't seem to have made enemies, and he was part of what appeared to be a majority alliance. He knew he'd be getting votes from the other side, but he never expected two of his original tribe mates to flip on him. Should he have seen that coming? What could he have done differently to change this outcome? It's time to figure out why Dwight lost. Now, I'm dedicating the first rule to James Bond 007. This is the most important rule and tells players they need to scheme and plot. And it seems pretty clear Dwight knew he had to make those kinds of moves and did so during his time in the game. It's a good thing I have stuff to say because I
Well,
lost that.
007, like I can't wait to see where else this is gonna go. This is amazing. This is incredible.
He made Dwight made a tight, secretish alliance with Noel right away, while everyone else associated her with Justine and thought he was more on his own. Then he got together with Jesse, who also appeared to be on his own. But one thing we need to remember, because it came right back to the forefront this week, was that Dwight and Cody never got along from the beginning.
Right.
And there has always been a question of Noel and Dwight versus Jesse and Cody.
Right.
And, based on what I saw on social media, some people definitely didn't recall this. But we did, because that's what we do. And that's why we take notes all season long. Dwight said right away that he had made social bonds with everyone except Cody, who had never talked strategy to him. And, Dwight reiterated that very same thing in some of his interviews, such as with Dalton Ross.
And I think for Dwight, him coming into the game and creating the relationships that he did was obviously a great decision strategically. But I think it's almost like a personality thing, right? Where the stronger personalities seem to get together. And Dwight was he was almost kind of quiet and calm in the relationships that he created. He probably felt very good about them, but I feel like it's a different type of relationship when you have kind of almost like two alpha males who have come together. And Cody is definitely very desirous of being in charge, but not appearing as if he's in charge. Like he wants to be
Cody
like,
isn't a calm personality.
no, I mean, it's a little out there, right? I mean, what is it? He's living, isn't that what it says on his ass?
Living.
So I do think that Dwight found himself in an interesting dynamic, if you will, because he's just so kind of calm and relaxed that for someone like Cody, like, no, I'm not okay with that because I want to be the one that's calling the shots and I want to be the one that's being listened to. And if this person is not listening to me, well, then I'm going to have a bit of an issue. And I've got Jesse over here as my wingman, and we're going to make this happen. And so I feel like it was more of a personality thing than anything. And it's unfortunate for Dwight because I think he kind of fell into it. Was like, well, that's just the way Cody wants to be. And we just don't really jive. So that's okay. But he probably should have pushed a little bit more.
Well, and that actually brings us back to a conversation we had in Why Justine Lost about finding a way to break through even when someone is not talking strategy to you. Now, with this, a bit more information that we have, it wasn't only Justine, but also Dwight saying the same thing. And, even when Nneka left, she indicated it was the reverse, that Noel and Justine bonded so quickly that it closed the door. And we were left, specifically saying, well, we have a chicken and egg situation. We don't know which is which.
Yeah.
But with Dwight adding his thoughts now, it really does seem like it was more of a Cody issue, with Cody not talking game with half the tribe for the first few days.
Yeah.
And, maybe when we eventually hear from Cody, we'll find out what he has to say. But for now, I don't know what more Dwight could have done to get through to Cody, especially given what we'll be discussing when we get to the second rule. But I just don't know.
Well, and that's fair. And that's why I think Cody is almost in a better position, or was in a better position coming into the merge than someone like Dwight because of his personality. So even though he's not talking strategy with everyone, the fact that he's loud and he's funny and he's got this personality, people kind of gravitate towards him. And Dwight was someone who was not like that. He was a little more calm and still a very incredibly likable and making relationships, but just in a different way. And I do feel like come into the merge, Dwight ends up being almost in just an unfair position to start because he's not coming in like the popular kid or the one who appears to be the popular kid, right? Even though he's got those relationships. So and then you've got all of the issues that Noel had with Justine, and Noel had to kind of like bring herself back, and that's who he's associated with. So the narrative that's attached to him coming into the merge is much different than the narrative that Cody has coming into the merge, which can certainly be detrimental to your game.
Right. And you mentioned, the relationships. And we saw the show went over everything with Jesse and Dwight's, quote, marriage, and their divorce. And then, them getting along after that when they were winning challenges. But from my viewpoint, it was never really a situation where Jesse was a solid Dwight ally.
Right.
Based on the information we had, Jesse had placed himself in a great spot with everyone thinking he was on their side till that first vote.
Mm-hmm.
And then even after that, he still managed to convince Dwight and Noel to trust him, as we saw and wondered about when Noel didn't use her steal a vote at the next tribal council.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight explained in interviews that Jesse told him about the plan to vote out Justine just before tribal council. And Dwight was mad. But then he forgave Jesse, in part because he said, well, he can't hold a grudge in the game, but also because, well, Jesse was in the majority at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But he said he kept a note in the back of his mind. But then going to merge, he told Dalton he trusted Jesse and also knew that Jesse and Cody worked well together. So he was hoping he could work with that. So I feel like Dwight did many things right here in terms of, thinking it through and planning.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think Jesse ever saw Dwight as a true solid ally, but rather as a disposable and, maybe controllable side option if he should need it.
Right. And you should probably add to this as well. Jesse has a very strong relationship with Cody. And what is Cody talking about? Dwight being a strategist, right? And having an issue with, but, and I know we will, but but it's one of those things where I feel like Jesse also is taking note of that as well, that, my guy, Cody, has an issue with Dwight. Perfect. Because when I need it, I'm going to use that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Jesse had those options because he, much like Carla did on Coco, Jesse did something similar on Vessi.
Right.
And I just think a lot of what happened to Dwight in terms of this rule was that he got outplayed. Again, comparable to what Carla did at Coco.
Exactly.
He was thinking Cody and Jesse wouldn't turn on him so soon. But we heard Jesse talk about that a little and say, well, you need to make moves early rather than play someone else's game. And he was a step ahead. You can't expect people to wait until your schedule to move against you.
Yeah.
It reminds me recently here in town, there was a cougar traveling through from Nebraska. And it was in some people's yards and some other areas.
Jeez.
And the local newspaper.
Are you dedicating this to the cougar?
No. But the local newspaper. So there had been forecasts that it would continue to move on the next day. Well, the next day it hadn't moved on. And the local newspaper headline or story was the cougar did not move on as scheduled. Nobody told the cougar it's scheduled. Nobody showed it the calendar.
This is where you're at now, cougar. It's time for you to go.
Yeah. And so it's, that's what this reminds me of is, Jesse didn't look at Dwight's calendar and go, oh, I'm not scheduled to blindside him yet, so I have to wait.
Right. Well, and that was a discussion too between Cody and Jesse. Was this too soon?
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, when you come in to play the game of Survivor, everyone does have their own schedules and their own gameplay and their own things that they want to do. That's why you have to adjust depending upon what other people are doing around you.
Yeah. All right. I dedicate the second rule to the state of Illinois.
The whole state?
The whole state.
Wow.
This rule says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Which, if you know anything about Illinois, you understand why I dedicated that.
This is amazing. Can we do dedications all the time?
I want
to see how deep down you're going to go with these dedications.
We'll see. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the Cody and Dwight relationship might have been hampered by something related to this rule, and you kind of dipped your toe in the water.
I know. I went
Um,
ahead.
but specifically, Cody started calling Dwight the strategist of the
Mm-hmm.
tribe from like day 2 or 3, according to Dwight's interviews. And just as Cody was clearly worried about Justine or wanted a target on her, he also seemed to feel the same about Dwight, but he was playing a bit more of a long game with Dwight rather than going after him right away like he did
Mm-hmm.
with Justine. Probably because Jesse seemed to have like taken Dwight under his wing or had some control
Mm-hmm.
over him.
Yeah.
But it raises the question of why Cody thought that about Dwight. And unfortunately, we don't really have great answers there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we could make some educated guesses based on how Dwight discussed things. And in some conversations where like he was outwardly weighing different options on how to handle things, he was debating strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Cody was going to go raid Coco and Dwight's like, well, this is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do, etc.
Right.
But even so, I suspect that much the same way Cody labeled Justine, he did it to Dwight by taking a little bit of information and repeating it over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Cody is doing a very great job of creating people's narratives for them by also utilizing the personality that he sees that person having. And I think someone like Dwight, who in his interviews talked about how he was explaining to them points in the game and when to expect certain things to happen. Now, someone like Cody is a much more recent viewer, right? He's not a Survivor super fan. He started watching very, very recently. And so in Cody's mind, hearing someone who is a super fan, who has watched every episode from the beginning and can tell you start to finish and knows dates and how many days and when things happen, in Cody's mind, he probably thought, oh no, this is someone who I have to watch out for because this is someone who really understands Survivor. No, Dwight just understood how the game worked, like the game mechanics. There's a certain thing that we all know comes from Survivor. There'll be votes every so many days. There'll be potentially a swap. There'll be a merge. Like these are all things that people who watch the show know. And Cody just took that and spun it into this narrative that seemed to fit in the personality of Dwight because he is this kind of quietly maybe brooding individual who is, secretly scheming and plotting and setting these things up, just like you said, he did with just Justine. Where you can't trust people that are salespeople. You can't trust them. And again, created this narrative. And so Cody is very good at picking those little tidbits out of people's personalities and turning it into something that it's not.
Right.
But there's at least a backstory to point to say, see, aha, I told you. Did you hear what he was just saying? He was just talking about this. And then, of course, people go along with it because, well, it sounds like it makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Dwight said in his interviews that he hoped Cody wouldn't talk about him being the strategist outside of Vesey, and he wanted to, try to salvage things with Cody. But as we heard from Lindsay's interviews and then again from Dwight's, Cody told all of Coco that Dwight was the mastermind. And like you mentioned, and like we see on Survivor, and like we see in real life, if you repeat something enough times, whether it's true or not, people are going to start to believe it.
Yep. Oh, yes.
So with all of that said, it raises the question, especially as it pertains to this rule, what could Dwight have done differently to avoid being labeled this way? And I really don't know, because he couldn't have known how Cody would react, much like Justine wasn't going to lie about being a salesperson.
Right.
Once he got labeled that way by Cody, about the only thing he could have done, I think, was to try to get rid of Cody to stop the bleeding.
Right. And this was where Dwight finds himself in such a difficult spot because of Jesse. There's that other relationship that he has to consider. And it's a very, very tough spot to be in when you know that this person over here is saying things about you. And also, to give Cody a little more props here, Cody was probably doing it in his very Cody fashion, right? Like, look, the strategist over here, like not doing it in a threatening way, not sneaking around behind Dwight's back telling people, doing it right in front of Dwight's face.
Right.
Because in that way, he's just like, oh no, I'm just being funny. I'm just joking. I'm being
Right.
sarcastic and whatever. And those types of people are incredibly scary because they're willing to call you out on stuff in front of other people and you,
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting you on the defensive, but then they're, oh, well, I'm just joking. I don't mean
Yeah, it's
anything by
kind of
that.
like that one jerk person we all, or maybe more than one, that we all knew in school, all knew in work. You know, he would, oh yeah, hey, Shorty, come over here. Hey,
Yeah.
oh, ha ha ha. I'm just
Yeah.
joking.
Right. But saying things that are very detrimental to you as a
Right.
person
Right.
that can have incredibly bad effects on you. And clearly it was affecting the way that people were thinking of Dwight, because
Yeah.
now he's being associated with Noel and the strategist. And so there's all of these components that are now working against him. And he's just kind of like, well, what did I do?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And he tried to fix it by working with Cody, but that was just never happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, moving on from that, I want to go back in time and talk about something else related to this rule from the early days. Because way back in episode 2, Dwight had no vote, and yet he kept trying to push the agenda that he wanted on Jesse. To my mind, he should have been saying whatever you want.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he had no vote.
Right.
And I'm sure he was trying to pull an Omer and control things even without having a vote, like Omer did. But Omer did that at the pseudo merge in a much more sly fashion, rather than just saying, no, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
He manipulated people into doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That was not what was happening here. And Dwight just felt he had more options with Justine and Noel, which was certainly true. But maybe he should have thought of that before risking his vote.
Well, that's the strategist in him, right?
I mean, yeah, he said he risked his vote because he knew he was safe at this tribal council no matter what. But sometimes you can't just look at the vote right in front of you.
Yeah. Long term is a better planet.
Right. He obviously didn't realize Jesse would, turn the way he did. Right. But by losing his vote, he lost the power to steer the outcome, and that had long-term consequences.
Well, and that's the problem too with a 6-person tribe. Mm-hmm. Your vote becomes so much more significant when it's only 6 people, and when you know that it's basically 2, 2, and 2, right? Like at that point, you have to look at it and go, I need my vote so much here, because the divisions are, it's not like there was 5 and then just one random person that wasn't getting along with everyone. No, it was literally 2, 2, and 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we can go on. The third rule tells players to be flexible, and I dedicate this rule to the many incarnations of Doctor Who. How do you think Dwight did here?
Okay, Doctor Who. This is all over the place. These dedications. This is amazing. I love this.
Just as those things were meaningful to Gabler, these things are meaningful to me.
Okay, all right. I'm going to give it to you because this is very entertaining. So, do I think he was flexible? I don't know if he could have been flexible. This is his issue where he kind of locked himself in with Justine and Noel. But that wasn't a bad option because he also had Jesse. And so did he need to be flexible? Not really. And he was kind of shut off from Cody. So, well, I mean, I've got 2 solids, another person who's like there with me. I'm good. And you just said it. He thought for sure he was fine in that first vote. He wasn't going to have to worry about it. So he risked his vote. So I think he didn't think there was a need to be flexible because he had those people. But then when we saw him in the merge, he seemed to be more flexible and he was opening himself up to other permutations. But at the same time, he wasn't getting himself away from those people that were causing him problems. So it's like he wanted to be, but he was still locked and loaded with his Vessi crew when he really needed to be like, wait a second, maybe I need to start looking at Vessi as opposed to trying to work with Vessi and Baca and bring us all together like a happy family. So I don't think he needed to at the beginning. And then at the merge, I think he needed to be more than he was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say he tried to be somewhat flexible in terms of things like forgiving Jesse, trying to work with Cody. But like you just said, he didn't think outside the Vessi box. He just thought Vessi and Baca, they're going to work together. We're going to get rid of Coco. And then I have a plan for going from there. And, but he just did not foresee Jesse and Cody flipping on him this early.
Right.
And, in Survivor these days, like it or not, tribal alliances just don't usually hold. Certainly, they don't hold long enough to fully eliminate another tribe.
Yeah, especially when one of your tribe members has been kind of throwing you under a little bit, right?
Right. And so he needed to know someone was going to try to pull something. And like you said, he should have looked outside that Vessi box to have his own backup alliances for this exact situation, because he had nobody to tell him what was going on.
Right.
He's telling Sammy stuff. He's telling Jesse stuff. And there was no one on the other side to say, hey, you're in danger.
Right, because Sammy and Jesse are running over to Coco being like, guess what?
Yeah.
I know what's going on.
Yeah. All right. We can move to the fourth rule. I am dedicating the fourth rule to Isaac Asimov and his laws of robotics. and the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. I'm going to toss this one to you also. How do you think Dwight did here?
I mean, I feel like Dwight did really well in maintaining his composure through all of this. I mean, it's got to be frustrating knowing that you have one person that's kind of putting you out there for the whole world to see as a strategist, and you're trying to be defensive but not at the same time, because you don't want to seem like I don't want to acknowledge that person and act like I need to defend myself against what's being said. So I think he did a really good job of keeping himself centered, but I also feel like he needed to probably push a little bit more. He didn't let his emotions control him because he was even keeled, but he probably would have been better off to let that take over just a little bit, because maybe then he could have seen that what's happening is not beneficial to him. And what Cody is doing is really playing with the outcome of Dwight, which is exactly what we saw happen.
Yeah. I mean, I to go back again to him forgiving Jesse for essentially turning on him and saying you can't hold a grudge. That's all very good in terms of this rule. And I don't think he was trying, on the flip side, to keep anyone because of friendship either. So, I think he did pretty well here. All right. Well, then I can dedicate the fifth rule to Weird Al Yankovic and his new biographical movie that came out Friday. This rule reminds players that they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Back in the first rule, we discussed Dwight's relationship, or lack thereof, with Cody. And actually, I say back in the first rule, but for almost every rule so far. While that's mostly a strategic situation, you brought up that there's also some sort of underlying social separation between the two of them, a personality clash, I think you called it. But as we already covered, I just am not sure what more Dwight could have done beyond accounting for it on the strategy side, because when it came to everyone else, and getting along with everyone else, I think Dwight did fine in this rule.
Yeah, no, I think Dwight certainly did fine. And he did form very close relationships. Clearly, he was able to form such a close relationship with Janine that she trusted him with her idol. So, I do think that he was someone who was creating those social bonds, but he's got this other thing that's happening that is outside of his control, and that's Cody. And so it's just unfortunate, no matter how nice you can be. And I'm curious if some of what Cody was doing almost required Dwight to be more nice, right? Because if Cody is out saying these things about him, and he wasn't saying that bad things about
Right.
Cody in regards to his personality, but that, maybe that held Dwight back a little bit because he didn't want to feed into the narrative that Cody had created about him. And so that might have caused him to be extra nice and maybe a little more accommodating to people just because he was trying to dissuade that idea that he was this master strategist that was going to take over the whole island. So good at that.
Well, thank you. I've practiced my whole life.
You did too.
I know I have.
That's crazy.
I would say every year on my birthday, but that would be a Amazing Race reference, not a Survivor reference. So, all right. I dedicate the 6th rule to all of Star Trek. And
all of Star Trek?
All of it. And this rule.
But time out. All of Star Trek, like the movies, the show, everything Star Trek. Okay.
Everything.
I want it to be clear that this dedication is covering a significant amount of material.
Everything. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And the 6th rule warns against being too much of a threat, but unfortunately for Dwight, well, we've already mentioned this. He was tagged as one by Cody from the early goings.
Yeah.
We discussed quite a bit how he was labeled as a strategic mastermind, and that was all spread around. Cody further said in this episode that Dwight was good at puzzles and the game in general, but I don't think that was the only way he was seen as a threat. And this is something I mentioned before we got to the rules, because, we saw Noel pushing to vote out James while Jesse said he trusted Carla more than Noel. And he, talked about how she was accumulating power. And I, as I mentioned, and we discussed earlier, I think unspoken was that they also saw how everyone reacted to her in the challenge, and they don't want to face someone like that at the end. However, Dwight made it very clear in his interview with Gordon Holmes that the players had noticed the trend in the votes to this point. As he said, quote, "In no universe were they voting out a woman." With that in mind, if you aren't going to vote out the main person you might otherwise be targeting, what do? You vote out an ally to weaken them.
Right. If you can't cut off the head of the snake, you cut off the
arm.
Snake charmer.
Okay. I was going to say, I said the arm, but then I realized snakes don't have arms.
It's a snake. No, and I really do think that this is the problem that brings us all the way back to the duo component, right? Because he and Noel were incredibly close, and that had become more and more apparent as the game moved on because Justine was out of the picture. And I thought it was interesting that we even saw Noel talking about this at the beginning of the episode or did I say Justine or Janine? I think whatever.
You said Justine, but I don't remember.
But Justine, okay. But we saw her talking to Janine about how she had to come back from that when they had labeled her and Justine very close, and that she had to kind of change her game. So Noel was very cognizant of that fact. And so I think it's interesting that Dwight kind of stepped into that role, and it was still obvious to people that Dwight was that role in regards to Noel.
Right.
And so it is unfortunate for someone like Dwight that that's how you take out the power of Noel, is you go after the person that's her second. And that ended up being Dwight in this instance. So it is a very difficult spot for Dwight to find himself in. But there is that added component as well of who should go next. And it's not going to be another woman. And so now who's next in line? It's going to be Dwight, unfortunately, because of the association to Noel. And also Cody. It's back to Cody.
Yeah. And you're right. This is something we probably should have mentioned, as them being a duo back in the second rule. I think that one reason it was so obvious is because you had Jesse and Cody. I think if other people had come in, they might not have noticed it as much. Maybe they would have. I don't know. But, Dwight was there. Like you said, Cody wanted him out. And as Jesse said on the episode, it gave Cody agency.
Yes.
So really it dealt with a threat issue in multiple different ways.
Right. I mean, they literally said take out Dwight and weaken Noel. And so that was the goal in all of this. But also, you have Jesse who is placating Cody at the same time. And guess what? Jesse doesn't necessarily look like the bad guy because it wasn't his idea. It was Cody's idea.
Right. All right, we can move on to the 7th rule, which covers idols, advantages, and game mechanics. And I dedicate this rule to my podcast partner and friend, Jessica Lewis.
I was wondering if I was going to get a dedication. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, it means so much to me. So kind.
Now, we already discussed Dwight risking and losing his vote back in the 2nd rule because it seemed like a more appropriate place for it. But there are several other advantage-related issues we need to discuss here. First, the situation with knowledge is power was interesting in a couple different ways. We saw James find the clue with several other people, including Dwight. Then we saw James finding the advantage with seemingly nobody around, leading to many people wondering, why would you let him be alone at the camp?
Right. What the hell happened there?
Well, it turns out Dwight got to camp first.
I know.
Decided not to get the advantage. Saw James and was like, camp is open. You can grab it. And then when he did that, Dwight then scampered down to the beach and started telling everyone, hey, James got knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Hey, did you know James has an advantage?
James has an advantage? Is it knowledge is power?
Yeah, I think it's knowledge is power.
Oh.
Tell him. Yeah.
Yeah, he could take idols with that.
You know what? And here's the thing. Then James is running around telling everyone. Anyway, but
well, I suspect it's because people already knew. But yeah,
right.
I mean, Dwight said in interviews that he saw knowledge is power as a flawed advantage, and he's right. He added that it hurts people who have advantages, and he didn't want Cody and Janine to have any incentive to get rid of him, as if Cody needed more incentive. And, I mean, it's really not a bad thought. Let someone else take the bait, then tell everyone that he took the bait.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And
the whole setup of that was problematic for the 4 of them from the start because you have 4 people finding this together, and that right there is bad, right?
Yeah.
Because now everybody knows that whoever takes that bottle has an advantage. So that's an issue. I'm fascinated that they still stood there and read it, like they took it out to read it, and they were like, to me, it's. If you decide at that moment, you know what, none of us want this, then you take the bottle and you get rid of it in its entirety, right? Go burn it in the fire. That way nobody knows what it is, and then nobody can have any finger pointing going on, and none of that would have happened.
Yeah, but they all want it. It doesn't matter. It's like its own version of a beware advantage,
It really is.
Beware. Everybody's going to know.
It's like everybody's just like, I just want a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to work. I thought Dwight's plan was going to work when James was telling
certainly
people,
wasn't a bad idea. Certainly not.
He's saying he wanted to use it to forge bonds because we've seen how well that's worked in the past, like 2 weeks ago. But it seems like the new alliance was probably formed by this point, and people weren't going to suddenly switch just because of this, or at least not yet, not in time to help Dwight.
Yeah. No, I do appreciate the approach that he took because he was thinking outside of the box at that point. Like, okay, how can I use this to my advantage? Mm-hmm. And if I tell everyone he has it, well, then great. You like that? Mm-hmm. That does take the power away because that's the one thing we've talked about with knowledge is power. It's powerless if everyone knows you have it. Right. Because then what do? They play shuffle and they move everything around. And it still didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly that. Being back in the game did lead to something else happening, which was the merry-go-round of advantages. So James, who wouldn't know who had what. The problem, as we've already discussed, was that Dwight thought Jesse and Cody and Sammy were on his side.
Yes.
So at the very least, he told them things were moving around. I'm not sure exactly who knew what, since, for example, Noel hadn't even told Jesse and Cody about her steal a vote last we knew, but they knew he had Janine's idol. So this added yet another reason to vote out Dwight. I don't know if it was the final straw or just an added bonus, But it certainly didn't help matters for Dwight for them to know, oh, and by the way, if it not only do you get to vote out Dwight, who is a strategist and a threat, but we will throw in this bonus idol that used to belong to Janine.
Yay! Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it. It is a very incredible process that they all had to go through. If that's where they went and went, wait a second, double whammy. That's incredible. Let's do that. Yeah.
Now, of course, the fact that he had Janine's idol means we also need to look at whether he should have played it. With 2020 hindsight, yes, obviously he should have played it.
Right.
But
Sure.
he had no way to know that going in.
Yeah.
He said in interviews that he knew he'd be getting some votes, but he thought he'd be safe. However, he also said he tried to switch the vote split because he saw Sammy, talking to Carla. And, so he was worried, just not worried enough to play someone else's idol. Because if he had done that and he was wrong, then he obviously would have been in a bad spot with the people who were supposed to have been his allies.
Right.
So he said if it had been his own idol, that would have been another matter. But the added layer made things more complex. And I think it just goes back to what we said in the first rule about him being outplayed. He thought he might be getting a fifth vote because of Sammy. He had no idea he was getting votes from Jesse and Cody.
Well, and this I'm curious about because he did mention something about whispering at tribal council and getting called out.
Yeah, he was whispering to Janine to try to get her to change the way the split vote was going on. But
but twofold. Like one, whisper to her about, hey, I think I should play your idol for myself because I feel like this is what's happening.
Yes.
So whisper to her about that. And then also, who was calling him out? It must have just
Jeff.
But stop it, because Jeff loves it when they whisper. And this is the problem I have with this. Why is all of a sudden Jeff calling people out for whispering?
But he always does that. If anyone whispers at tribal council and he sees it, he'll be like, oh, I see Dwight and Janine whispering over there.
Okay,
Would you like to share with the class?
That kind of call out. Then you just go, no, Jeff. And you keep whispering.
Yeah.
I almost dropped an F-bomb. You just do it anyway, even though I hate the whispering. But if you are at that point where like you're reading the room and you're thinking, oh my gosh, things are going badly right now. Like I feel like there's a thing here.
Right.
That's the whispering. You just have to be like, Jeff, stop it. Get out of my game for 2 seconds. I need to take care of this right now. And and then you do that. I mean, and maybe, and who knows, if Dwight had taken that stance, maybe then you cause a little ripple over here and you make them start second guessing their choice because they know Dwight has an idol. They know that Dwight is now talking to Janine, and maybe you just say, hey, listen, I have an idol in my pants and I'm considering playing it. I'm talking to Janine about that. And then maybe that's all you need to cause that like, oh shit.
Well, except if he says that, then James says, hey, do you have an idol?
That's fair too. And that is fair. Knowledge is power. So so it's all bad. But I just feel like at that point, like you got to do the whispering if you have to.
Yeah, and I believe he said in at least one interview that he didn't want to cause a live tribal council situation. And I think he just, like I said, he had no idea Jesse and Cody were turning on him.
Yeah,
and so
I know.
he thought things might go bad. He just didn't think they would go that bad.
Right. Crazy.
All right. We can move on to Appendix A, which is about the other players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting off the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. And I am dedicating this to Rob Sesternino.
Aw, look at you.
Because he still never understood the weak, then the strong, then the weak.
That's
or
perfect.
Never liked it. Yes. This is a tough one to evaluate because we saw so little of the motivations of those who flipped, other than them feeling good about Carla, it seems. And you know what would have been nice in this episode?
Some explanation?
Yes. Showing why Jesse and Carla trusted each other so much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
plus why Sammy and Carla did.
Well, I will say this, they did have a little bit of a nugget because Jesse was talking about how he feels very similar to Carla
Mhm.
in certain life experiences that they've had, and that she feels like a sister to him. So that explanation was there, but
They
for like,
learned a lot about each other in a short time.
but that's what I'm saying. It was like 2 seconds. It was like, hey, by
Yeah,
the way, we really like each other and we like each other so much. We're going to completely flip the whole game on its head, and you're going
right.
to hear 2 seconds about why.
Yeah. Now, Stephen Fishback said Jesse and Carla were not only both at UC Berkeley, but they were the same year at UC Berkeley.
Oh,
Now, UC Berkeley is a big school.
sure.
Okay. I mean, that's like when I went to University of Illinois and people would
Which you
ask
dedicated
me,
an entire rule to Illinois.
no, that was the state of Illinois.
I know, and
Uh,
to Illinois.
yes. People were like, oh, do you know Joe Smith? It's like there are 30,000 people at the University of Illinois. No, I do not know Joe Smith.
Let me
I
think
mean,
about that.
yeah. But if you're in the same year, is it possible that they have some friends in common?
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah,
it is
it's
possible.
possible. But, of course, production isn't going to want to show that on TV. They don't like showing when they accidentally find people who have overlap like that.
Yeah.
Like the former neighbors, that we had one season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so for whatever the real reasons were, they all seemingly trust each other and thought it would be better for their games to go forward in this manner. I do think a lot of it, and maybe I'm overly focused on this, but I think a lot of it has to do with not wanting to face Noel at the end. I mean, I've mentioned that. So they don't want her to be able to build up a head of steam. Why let her
Mm-hmm.
alliance get going?
Yeah.
Plus, they already know there are cracks in Coco. So it's not like sometimes when you move into another alliance, you're moving into last place. So they clearly don't
Yeah.
feel like they are. Of course, when you're aligning with Carla, you never feel like you're in last place. You always feel like you're her closest.
I know.
But
Carla's awesome.
she has a whole circle of people who think they're her closest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but until we know their actual plan, it is really hard to judge this one when it comes to Jesse, Cody, and Sammy.
Yeah, and but here's the thing too. I mean, I feel like Sammy is still in such a safe spot because I feel like he hasn't been like called out yet
Mm-hmm.
and caught. This is very clearly called out and caught, right? Because it's 2 Vessi people clearly had to turn on the other 2 Vessi people to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no place for Cody and Jesse to hide in this vote. And I do think that there is a possibility that there could be some upheaval from it because you have Sammy. Sammy is just slithering his way through everything. And I really do feel like Sammy could use this as the ability to then turn on both Cody and Jesse because he still has the ear of all of Baca
Mm-hmm.
because no one has been like catching him doing any of the things that he is doing.
Right. And I will respond to that when we get to our predictions.
Ooh, okay.
So with that in mind, it is about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts on Dwight?
The master strategist. That is what we have here before us, ladies and gentlemen. He was someone who was clearly a threat to Cody for whatever reason, because apparently he knew how to play Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, Cody could not let him continue to play Survivor. And Cody labeled him as the strategist, just as we had seen him do with Justine. And I almost feel like Cody had this idea in his head that, boy, it worked so well with Justine. I can make it work with Dwight. And this is what he ended up doing. He created this narrative surrounding Dwight and put Dwight in a very difficult spot where he couldn't really get out of because he wasn't controlling the information, someone else was. And unfortunately for Dwight, there was Jesse. And Jesse was the swing man that Cody needed to make all of this happen. He needed someone else to help push that information forward and needed someone else to buy into it and also allow Cody the ability to run with it. And so, unfortunately for Dwight, I think he just found himself, as you've said, outplayed by people who are playing this game. But I feel like they both realized it. I feel like both Jesse and Cody contemplated the idea that maybe this is too soon, but they wanted to play Survivor because they want to be legends, right? And so
Living
Dwight,
legends.
living legends. So Dwight is trying to play Survivor in the way that he knows Survivor to be played, methodically, slowly, take your time, make the right moves, do them when you need to, build those relationships. Dwight was doing all of those things, and he was doing them very well. But unfortunately, he found himself playing the game with other people who wanted to play it a little bit faster, a little bit harder, and a little bit sooner. And that, I think, is where Dwight ended up falling and getting voted out.
I'd like to dedicate these final thoughts to Dr. Dieter, my high school English and writing teacher, who was also my favorite teacher overall because of her incredibly sarcastic sense of humor. It is only because of her that I am able to write this conclusion.
Aw, look at that.
Dwight understood a lot about the game of Survivor. He saw what was happening early with Cody and moved to try to counter it or work with him, but it just wasn't working. He had patience, though, and believed he could get through to him at the merge. Plus, he trusted Jesse, even though Jesse had done him dirty once before. He was flexible enough to recognize that he couldn't just turn his back on them. The problem was Cody was not as flexible, and I don't think Dwight realized all the damage Cody had done to him. Whatever the reason, Cody had started planting seeds against him from the very start, almost as much as if he had been a salesperson. Cody was not about to change his mind, and Jesse was much tighter with him than he ever was with Dwight. At the merge, despite his stated plan for Baca and Vessi to join forces, Jesse had his own ideas and, like so many others, was drawn to trust Carla. As he said, he wasn't going to play someone else's game, and he certainly wasn't going to wait to make his move as Dwight thought he would. Dwight became the perfect target for multiple reasons. I already mentioned that he'd been labeled by Cody as the strategic threat. He was also the tight ally of Noel, who was seen as gaining too much influence and probably also as too much of a threat to win at the end. And as the cherry on top, he had Janine's idol in his possession and was unlikely to use it. Dwight played the game well from his perspective, but I think the main thing lacking was an understanding of the perspective from other players. He thought he could reason with Cody, but that wasn't possible after Cody had invested so much effort against Dwight. He thought he was tighter with Jesse, but Jesse had gone against him once already. He thought he had more time before they moved on him, but they likely knew that and were thinking ahead of him. Dwight and Jesse were both playing the game, but Jesse was a few steps ahead, and that is why Dwight lost.
Poor Dwight.
Poor Dwight. All right.
Master strategist.
Well, before we get to our predictions, I would like to dedicate this moment to our poster.
Yes!
Which you can get at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Scroll down, click order. Same with our t-shirts.
That's right.
Our mugs, our sweatshirts. It's getting colder out. You name it, it's there. Again, robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
I love it.
Now, moving into predictions.
Mm-hmm.
The preview made it seem like there would be an uprising of the type you were discussing.
Yes.
And the problem is we've seen Sammy being like that before, pretending to be on one side while actually being on the other.
Oh, sure.
So one of two possibilities. He's either going to truly join them and swing back and forth in a Will Wall pendulum strategy, or he's continuing to work with Carla and Jesse and is just trying to lead them astray. Because after all, as Ellie told Mike Bloom last week, I thought that Sammy was still aligned with me. He's very convincing. I don't know if he's getting enough credit for his social game. So I really felt like even after knowing that he had betrayed my trust that one time, I can still trust him. I bet the minority group here feels the same way. I don't think there will be an actual uprising. I expect this will be a rather straightforward vote against someone in the minority. That narrows it down, but we still have to wonder who. we discussed that last time there was no way they were voting out a woman. So the natural next question is, did the Dwight vote satisfy that situation? Or is there still a strong feeling among the majority, specifically the women in the majority, that they shouldn't be voting out any more women yet? If they still don't want to vote out a woman, that puts Owen and Gabler in the crosshairs. I do think that while Sammy turned on Owen, he could still consider him a potential asset. So that would mean Gabler. But are they really going to waste a vote at this point on a guy who has no chance of winning the game? So if they're okay with voting out a woman, Janine is a tempting target now that she has lost her idol. But that also puts Noel back on the board, and she is certainly a bigger threat than Janine. So with all that in mind, I think they're going to go with the original plan that Jesse wanted this time and vote out Noel.
I disagree.
What?
I know, it's crazy, right? So I kind of went back and forth about this one a little bit too, because I was curious about what we saw in the preview, but also I was curious about what they focused on in this very strange episode that gave us very little information. And one of the things that they spent time on was both Cody and Jesse discussing whether or not this was too soon. And that whole legends thing where Cody was like, this is when legends are made, right? And so why would you do that if there wasn't a potential story there, right? And maybe it's just we want to trick the viewers and create this narrative that, oh, maybe there's an uprising. But here's what I think is happening, and this is what I love about the people that are playing this game. Carla is amazing. She is such an incredible player because she is just quietly running the show and nobody has really no idea what she's doing. And Sammy's doing the same thing, but a little more obvious, right? Those are the two people that I'm focusing on when I'm looking at this and saying, okay, what are their goals, right? Well, both of them want to win. Obviously, everybody wants to win. But who do they control and who do they manage and kind of manipulate? Carla comes with a bunch of people. I mean, Carla has got a crew. She's got Cassidy. She's got James. Ryan really has no one. So Ryan's going to go wherever he's told to go, right? So she has at least 3 other people who are going to vote wherever she's like, this is what we're doing. And then you have Sammy, who's got the same, he's got Gabler 100%. Gabler is in Sammy's pocket. Whatever he tells Gabler, Gabler's going to do. Owen and Janine are going to be kind of on the outs now because of what happened. But Sammy, I think, will be able to spin it and be like, listen, I this is where we're at. Like, we have to work this, right? So this is where I head back over to Vesey. And if you have people who at this point are willing to show, I will go against my own people this soon, this like at this part in the game, and flip on them, Carla is going to know, well, that could be me too, right? And if they're willing to do this to one of theirs right now, when are they going to do it to me? And so I think Carla is going to come in strong here, but in a Carla way. And people aren't going to necessarily know that it's a Carla way. And this is why I'm looking back at Cody and Jesse. And who do I think they're going to pick between those two? I do think that Carla and Jesse are close, but what have we not seen? Any explanation, right? Besides the 2 seconds that we talked about as to why they care about each other.
Carla and Gio were close.
Right. So, I feel like between Cody and Jesse, Carla's going to look at them and say, well, Jesse is much more of a threat in this game than Cody is ever going to be. Because Cody is Cody, right? I mean, Cody's playing a game that I never expected him to play, but he's also much more apparent. It's not as underhanded. It's a little more out there. People kind of know what Cody is doing. And if you cut Jesse off, Cody's got no one. And Cody will kind of do whatever. And plus, Cody does have an idol, right? So there's that part of it too. So I feel like all of that buildup is going to bring it back to Jesse. This idea that, did we do this too soon? Was it the time to try to create a legend, or we should have waited? I think it's going to be Jesse.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Which is sad. Jesse's great too. But
Mhm.
I just feel like you have two people that are playing such incredibly underhanded games right now. And I have to appreciate that, because I want more of that. I
Yes.
definitely want more
Yeah.
of that in Survivor.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see. Will it be Noel? Will it be Jesse? Will it be neither?
It probably won't be either of them.
Right. Right. It'll be something else that comes totally out of left field. We'll
Right.
be like,
Right.
what?
Yeah. Right. We'll be like, damn it. So
Yeah.
bad.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. You can get access to the Survivor Academy podcast, which is several times, five times this season. Just had a great one with Matt Scott last week. There's the patron 5 for 5 every week. There's more. When Rob isn't talking directly to everyone, there are the Facebook groups and Discord to keep you occupied with a great community of people, including both of us, where you can discuss Survivor, Big Brother, life in general. And so, definitely go to robhasawebsite.com/patron, or go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Click on the patron link there and support shows like ours, everything on the network. And once you get to the Facebook groups, make sure to say hello.
Yes, and you should also say hello to us on Twitter. I am at Jessica Lewis 89, and he is at David Bloomberg. You should certainly follow both of us to get our live tweets during the episodes and tweets throughout the week. And also, you should 100% follow at David_Bloomberg on TikTok, because let me tell you, the stuff that you are coming up with, rather impressive, I must say. It's very impressive. So you should definitely follow David Bloomberg on TikTok as well. So he is at David_Bloomberg on TikTok.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And I am, as I mentioned last week, I changed my name on Instagram to be a little.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, a little better, where I am David Bloomberg TV on Instagram.
It's about time.
Yes.
David #_ lowercase with a number.
Don't blame me, because other people stole my name.
So difficult.
I know. Everyone should make sure they're subscribed to all of the RHAP Survivor podcasts, again, by going to our YX Lost feed page. You'll get the Know-It-Alls, the Stock Watch, Survivor International, the B&B, and much, much more. So definitely go and do that.
And we would like to thank Scott St. Pierre, who does all of the editing for not only Why Blank Lost, but also all of the RHAP content. So thank you for all of the incredibly diligent and difficult work that you get us through every week, Scott. So thank you for that. And thank you to Will from America for the theme song that you've created for Why Blank Lost. It's super catchy and lovely, and we appreciate it greatly. So thank you so much. And David, listen, I would like to thank you for this incredible episode. And I would like to dedicate my time here today to you.
Aww.
And allowing me an opportunity to do this every week with you and to be part of this incredible RHAP family and do this podcast every week. So thank you for that.
See, now your dedication is only going to last you for like 30 seconds, because we're about to end. So you can't hold on much longer. You're just barely making through.
That's it. That's all I got.
But yes, thank you for being so dedicated. And we will continue to be dedicated to everyone else, even when we're done with all these dedications. We'll see you again in a week. Bye.
Bye.